Just reverse a bit and then off we go. So stitch all the way along to the next seam line. And then I do the same thing again along the other long edge, ready to mitre at the next corner. Nearly done. All I've got to do now is finish this last edge. I've mitered my last corner and I'm going to overlap the edge and tuck in the raw edge there and stitch along both sides. Now here, because I'm overlapping the edges and stitching down both sides, I'm going to go across the trim as well, so there's no little tuck for anything to get into. And then I can just stitch back down the last edge. There we are, all done. Now all I've got to do is add the other piece, the back piece. So I put them right sides together and stitch all the way around. Of course, the back could have had a zip in it, or I could do an envelope back, lots of choices. It's really good and it was so quick and easy. Now I'm going to show how to put on a trim that's in the seam, so it just dangles around the edge. It's a very pretty, effective treatment. So here I'm working with a beaded trim and it's on quite a plain tape, so you want that hidden within the seam. So all that will show once the cushion front and back are put together is the beading showing along the edge. To do this, you literally pin the beaded trim in place and you pin it so that the beading or the fringing, if you're using a fringed one, is towards the centre of the cushion and the straight edge of the trim is in line with the edge of the cushion piece. Because I'm using a beading trim, I want to get quite close to the beading edge, so I'm going to use a zipper foot. The first job is to attach the beaded trim to the right side of the cushion front. So at the moment I'm stitching sort of down the centre of the trim, holding the beads out of the way as I go, and this is just to get the trim in position, ready for putting the back on and sandwiching the two pieces together. Bit of a spurt there. When I get to the corner, I've actually trimmed or clipped into the tape so that I can go round the corner. So needle down, pivot, just a couple of stitches and then come on round. Let's knock these beads out of the way. Where both ends meet, as you can see, I've turned the raw edge over. I'm now going to cover that up, so when the top piece is on and that turns round, all of that will be hidden. Just overlapping the ends there. And that's ready now for me to sandwich the two together. I'm just going to chop the spare beads off. So now I get my cushion back and place it on top. Now, because these beads are tricky little devils, I'm actually going to sellotape them in place, or tape them in place with masking tape. Just holds them in place so they don't accidentally get under the needle, which of course could break the needle. So having got my beads out of the way, I'm now going to pin all the way around, and if you'll notice I'm actually pinning from the other side. I've put the back on, I've made sure it's open at the zip because I'm going to stitch all the way round. And the reason I want to stitch from this side is so that I can see the previous row of stitching and therefore make sure that my new row of stitching is inside that row. And that way it'll be the closest to the beads, and make sure that that retaining row of stitching doesn't show. It's always a good idea to start in the middle of the seam when you sew. I'm sewing with the previous line of stitching on the top so I can see it, and I'm going to move my needle over just a couple more notches so that it can get that little bit closer to the beading. Now this is quite tricky now because I'm sewing blind. I can't actually see the beading there, so I'm having to feel it with my fingers as I stitch. So I'm going to slow the machine down a bit. Not that much, I promise, but just a bit. Now again, I'm sewing with a blue thread just so you can see the sewing, but of course normally I would be sewing with a thread to match the fabric. I've got to my first corner. I turn slightly, pushing those beads out of the way. 3 stitches on the diagonal before going back along the next row. Bead. So I've now stitched it all the way round. I'm going to trim my seam allowances, and if the fabric was going to ravel easily or fray, I would neaten them with a zigzag stitch. And I'm going to cut the corners at an angle. That just makes them turn out a little bit more neatly. And of course, because I unzipped it, I can turn it through the zipped opening. There's my, oh, it sounds delicious, but that's actually my sellotape. So remove the sellotape. Tangle that with my fingers. And I can pull out the corners. And of course it needs a press. There is one other kind of trim you can use which is really lovely as well, and that's piping or flanged cord. So that's got a solid ridged edge which is going to be visible on the edge of the cushion, and it's attached with a tape, and that's going to be hidden in the seam. So these are actually stitched to a curtain or a cushion in exactly the same way as the beaded trim I've just done. So now you can apply trims to anything that you want. You've got 3 different methods of application, something for everything. But just before I go, there's one new trim from British Trimmings that you've got to see, and actually this is a no-sew trim. called a slingback. These trims come in this lovely long length, and you just literally attach them to the pole at the top next to the curtain edge, and then they'll just fall down along the curtain edge. You can wrap them round as well, so they become a tie back as well as a leading edge, and down to the ground or to the level of the curtain. If they're too long for your curtain, you can cut them smaller and tie a knot in them, but they're lovely and long, so they can actually work with full length curtains and wrap round as a tie back as well. Brilliant. And it comes in lots of different colours. Very quick and easy trim idea. Not that I should tell you too much about it, because I of course love sewing. That's a wrap. We've done 8 sequences and we've covered so much. We've done a tunic top using general dressmaking techniques. We've put in a zip. We've put darts in. We've used stretch knit fabrics and how to sew with them. We've used trims, and I've also shown how to put them into the seams and on top of them. Everything that you need to go away and have fun and sew. So do enjoy. But before I go, one word of thanks to my little brother. He's been fantastic. And of course, if you do want any more sewing hints and tips, do have a look at www.simplicitynewlook.com. I'm Wendy Gardner. Bye for now. Happy sewing.